I've always been fascinated by how history repeats itself, often in unexpected ways. Today, we're going to explore a troubling parallel in American history that might make you uncomfortable, but stick with me. We're diving into the dark chapter of Japanese American incarceration during World War II and drawing some unsettling connections to the immigration issues at the US-Mexico border today. Buckle up, because this is going to be a wild ride through time, prejudice, and the human cost of fear. So picture this. It's 1942, and the US has just entered World War II. Fear and paranoia are running rampant, and suddenly, anyone with Japanese ancestry is viewed as a potential threat. The result? Executive Order 9066, which authorized the forced relocation and incarceration of nearly 120,000 Japanese Americans, 2/3 of whom were US citizens. Let that sink in for a moment. American citizens, stripped of their rights and property, forced into camps surrounded by barbed wire and armed guards. But here's the thing. This wasn't just a momentary lapse in judgment. This incarceration lasted from 1942 to 1946, affecting families for generations. We're talking about people losing their homes, their businesses, their communities, all because of unfounded suspicion based on their ethnicity. Now let's zoom in on one specific camp, Topaz, Utah. You might be thinking, Utah? Really? Yep, really.
On December 7th, 1941, just hours after the bombing of Pearl Harbor, the FBI rounded up 1,291 Japanese community and religious leaders. They're called concentration camps because they concentrated. Not everybody, just Japanese ancestry people. In fact, our father was an agriculturalist, and so he was to manage the farm.
I was sitting by myself feeling very out of place when this little girl came up to me and she said, "Oh, I'm so glad to see you. I've never seen so many Japs in my life."
But here's the kicker. Despite the harsh conditions and the injustice of their situation, the Japanese American community in Topaz didn't just survive. They created a vibrant community life. They organized sports teams, clubs, and even published their own newspaper. Fast forward to today, and we're facing a different, yet disturbingly familiar scenario at the US-Mexico border. Now I know what you're thinking, but these situations are totally different. And you're right, in many ways they are. The legal framework, the global context, the specific policies, all different. But the underlying themes? The fear, the prejudice, the willingness to compromise human rights in the name of national security? That's where things start to look uncomfortably similar. Let's break it down. In both cases, we see government policies targeting specific groups based on ethnicity or national origin. We see families separated, lives disrupted, and communities torn apart. But here's where it gets complex. So where does this leave us? As we've seen, history has an uncomfortable way of echoing through time. The parallels between Japanese American incarceration and today's border issues aren't perfect, but they're significant enough to make us pause and reflect.
What are we willing to sacrifice in the name of security?
How do we ensure that fear doesn't override our commitment to justice and human rights?
These are tough questions, but they're questions we need to grapple with if we want to avoid repeating the darker chapters of our history.